So you want to get into drifting, huh? Well, I can't really blame you because same. According to the guys over at Red Bull, drifting is the fastest growing form of motorsport worldwide. Ranging from grassroots organizations such as clutch kickers all the way up to the Pro 1s of Formula D, the sport of drifting has tons of variety when it comes to the engines and chassis used. But if you're just starting out, it can be intimidating trying to figure out which car to get to jump in and learn. So today, we are taking a look at which cars you should consider buying as a beginner in the drift scene. Let's talk about it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sean and today we are talking about budget beginner drift cars. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that like button down below. It helps this channel grow immensely, so before we continue, go ahead and give me that thumbs up. And if you want to see more automotive content like this, you'll want to subscribe and turn on your notifications. As we go through the video, feel free to take a look at the timeline. I'll have it broken up and labeled with all the different cars we're going to talk about. Before we can jump into the recommendations, let's talk about what your car will need in order for you to go drifting. First of all, your car must be rear-wheel drive. As you're drifting through a corner, you need to be able to control the speed of the wheels that are sliding. Your car also must have a manual transmission. Sure, you can throw your automatic car around a corner and get the wheels to slip, but that's more of a controlled oversteer than true drifting. You need to be able to select exactly which gear you're in at any given time. Also, having a clutch is crucial to those cars that may be a little bit lower on power or maybe don't have a solid handbrake in order to initiate the drift into the corner. Learning how to clutch kick properly is a big proponent of acquiring the building blocks of true drifting skill. Now, those two things right there are probably 80% of the requirements list. Another really nice thing to have is a limited slip differential, aka an LSD. The differential, for those of you who don't know, is the unit at the rear of the car that connects the drive shaft to the axles. A limited slip differential can sense when one wheel is losing traction, so it will lock the shafts and both wheels will slide. If your car doesn't have an LSD, it has what's considered an open differential. An open differential always transfers an equal amount of power between the two wheels. So if one wheel is slipping, but the other one isn't, the wheel that is not slipping will not receive enough power to break traction. Having a car with an open diff really isn't the end of the world though, as you can have it welded. This will make it a dream to slide around on the track, but will probably make it a terrible daily. Just something to consider. Now you've got lots of other things you can consider upgrading, such as your suspension, steering angle, wheels, a hydraulic handbrake, or maybe even a dual caliper setup, but none of these are really required to start drifting. You'll have your standard consumables such as tires, brake pads, engine and transmission fluids, so those are basically the cost of entry. One thing to think about when you're choosing your car is that the heavier it is or the more power it makes, the faster you're going to go through these consumables and your regular cost of operation will go up. Now let's talk about some of the best options for you to get started drifting. First up on this list is the Mazda MX-5. It has its own acronym for a reason.
No matter the question, Miata is always the answer.
The Miata is just about the perfect option for every form of motorsport. From autocross to road rally, drifting is no exception. Now I know you're thinking, the Miata has like 100 horsepower, how are you gonna drift that thing? Sure, the Miata's a bit low on power, but it's really the chassis design that makes this thing shine. A perfect 50-50 weight distribution makes the Miata any racer's dream, as it'll be incredibly balanced when giving it the full send. In stock form, the Miata only weighs around 2,100 pounds fully loaded, so if you want to chuck the passenger seat and maybe get rid of some of your other conveniences, you can get it down to 2,000 pounds or even less than that if you want to gut the whole interior. There are 4 generations of the Miata, but really the ones you're going to want for drifting will be the first gen NA or the second gen NB. In 1994, the first gen Miata received the 1.8 liter 4-cylinder, putting out about 130 horsepower. So if you're looking to pick one up, I'd recommend a model year between 94 and 97. Both generations of the Miata came with trim levels that offered a Torsen limited slip differential. So if you're looking to pick one up to drift, try to make sure you get one that has an LSD. coming up second on this list is the BMW 3 Series, specifically the E36 model. Available throughout the 90s, the E36 is one of the best platforms to modify and start drifting. This is in part due to its weight distribution, but also thanks to its inline 6-cylinder engine options available. The 2.5-liter M50 B25 puts out about 190 horsepower and is available in model years from 1990 to 95. The 2.8-liter M52 B28 makes the same figure for power, but about 20 more foot-pounds of torque. Either option you decide to go with will net you a great platform to build on as you continue to develop your skills. These engines also provide VANOS, which is variable valve timing, and it's essentially the German equivalent of VTEC. Pair these engines with a sweet 5-speed manual, and you've got yourself one slick project drift car. Most of the ones you'll be able to find for cheap will be either the 2-seater convertible or the 4-door sedan. If you're lucky, you'll be able to snag yourself the 2-door coupe with the 5-speed manual, but if you're like most of us and you are on a budget, you're probably not going to be able to get a hold of an M3 because they're selling for closer to $14,000 to $15,000 on the low end. But the great thing about picking up a standard 3 Series is that most of the M3 parts are interchangeable with the lower spec models. So you can upgrade to M3 subframes, differentials, and so on as your needs progress. Third on this list is the Nissan 240SX. Now, don't go thinking that you're going to be able to get your hands on a right-hand drive import for anything less than $15,000. For this list, we're referring to the US spec, which came with the KA24 naturally aspirated 4-cylinder. This engine puts out 155 horsepower and 160 foot-pounds of torque, but we've seen these engines with turbo swaps, and on a stock block, you can get to 300 wheel horsepower pretty easily. Paired with a 5-speed manual and a viscous type LSD, these cars are pretty much ready to rip the day you pick them up. Available starting in 1994 as a 95 model year, the first iteration of the S14 is known as the Zenki model. This version is slightly softer and rounder, whereas the facelifted version, the Kuki, is more angular and is more often associated with what we know the S14 to be. Either way, both models have the same engine and trans options, so it's really a matter of aesthetic preference. But the Kuki models are more highly sought after and will come with a higher price tag. Now, y'all know this list wouldn't be complete if I didn't include the Nissan 350Z and the Infiniti G35. It's basically the modern version of the 240SX, but they're more available. Originally equipped with the VQ35DE V6 engine, the 350Z puts out about 280 horsepower, making it the highest power option on this list so far. And for the 2007 to 2009 model years, the 350 was available with the HR engine, which puts out just over 300 horsepower, thanks to the 7,500 RPM redline. Even though this seems like a small difference, the HR is actually a completely different block with improvements in pretty much every single way. This means that the 07 to 09 models are going to be more expensive, but if you can get one, it will net you a benefit in the long run. Don't get me wrong though, the DE engine is still really solid. Now, one thing to consider is that the base model did not come with an LSD, whereas the enthusiast trim did. So if you can only get a base model, you can either have your diff welded, or you can swap it out for one from the enthusiast trim level. If you're looking for something with some convenience, a car you can potentially daily, and a car that you can just swap the wheels and tires on and hit the track, then look no further than the Lexus IS300. Now, I know you guys weren't expecting this one on the list, but trust me, it's a bit of a sleeper. The IS300 was released in the year 2000 and it was available until 2005, and it came with the legendary 2JZ. If you guys want to learn more on the 2JZ, I'll leave my video for that right here. Although it was only available with the naturally aspirated version, the 2JZ GE put out about 230 horsepower. The US spec of the IS came with the option of a 5-speed manual, whereas the JDM spec came with the option of a 6-speed manual. I don't know how many times the US is going to get screwed out of getting the cool stuff.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Many of these cars came with LSDs from the factory, so you'll be able to jump in and start shredding. Now, for all my JDM fanboys out there who absolutely have to have a right-hand drive car for drifting, then I'd have to recommend the Toyota Mark II. The Mark II is also known by a few other names, but most notably the Tourer and the JZX90. This car came with the twin-turbo 1JZ GTE making 280 horsepower. Equipped with a 5-speed manual and a limited slip from the factory, these cars would be very nearly the perfect drift car if you can get your hands on one for a decent price. Now there are tons of other cars I could recommend, such as the SN95 Mustang if you want a V8 option, or the Toyota Corolla AE86 if you're looking for something nostalgic, but this is just my list for what I would recommend to someone looking to get into drifting. But that is going to wrap it up for this episode, guys. Leave me a comment down below what drift car you're thinking about buying. For me personally, it's hard not to look at the 350Z. The power it makes is solid, the aftermarket is huge, and they're pretty readily available. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop it a like down below. It really helps me out. If you want to see more from me, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new, and we'll see you guys on the next one.